So we're recording, aren't we?
We
Yes.
are recording. What are
Okay,
we
great.
talking about today? What is the
Well,
crack
welcome
today?
everybody in the What's the Crack with. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about what's the crack with evening eating, evening
Hmm.
snacking. I think is
Yeah, we get asked that a lot.
yeah, a lot of people wonder about like how do I just stop eating in the evening and snacking in the evening, even when I've had my dinner, and even if I'm not physically hungry, why do I snack in the evening? And there's kind of a lot of reasons why that might be happening. Like there's
Yeah.
not just one reason that that happens for us all. So we might just touch on maybe some of the reasons.
Yeah. So well, let's think, what are some of the reasons? So one of them definitely is restriction. If you're not eating enough during the day, then your body will reclaim that at night. So you want to be checking in, am I restricting? And you may not be physically restricting, but you might be mentally restricting. So you also have to watch that one and make sure you're not pseudo dieting, which is, pretending you're not dieting whenever you really are, or that's what the mind's doing. So I suppose restrictions throughout the day would be one. What other ones would you have? What other one?
Yeah, and we kind of call that like compensatory eating. People think like,
Yeah.
when you're restricting throughout the day or trying to eat as little as possible, we can often be doing that because a part of us knows we're going to eat in the evening. So we're like, oh, I'll save it up. So in case I eat more in the evening. But then it's like, then first of all, you're guaranteed to be eating more, but we often eat more food then in general throughout the day than we actually maybe perhaps need. Whereas if we actually just established regular eating and eating to our body's needs throughout the day, that in and of itself can often actually reduce evening eating and evening snacking for a lot of us, right?
Yep,
I think another
100%.
another big one is definitely nervous system depletion. I think that like if we think of our nervous system or our energy system, if we want to call it that, like a bank balance, and if we wake up in the morning and we've 100 quid in that bank,
If we're lucky
let's
enough
if we're lucky enough, right?
in
Because we
this day
might
and
not.
age.
If you didn't get a good night's sleep, you might be at 70, right? Or if you were up with small kids, you could be at 50. So, but if let's say we've had a good night's sleep, we're waking up refreshed, we're
Mhm.
ready to take on the day, we have 100 quid in the bank, then this in the morning we get up and we've got the kids and we're trying to get out to work and maybe we're stuck in traffic and you can see like ding 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 all the money is going down, like all of a sudden before
All the
you get to
energy.
work you're at
Yeah.
you're at
Yeah.
like 90, and then your boss says something really shitty at work and stresses you out, you're down at 70. And like basically throughout the day, you can imagine that there's all of these withdrawals from our nervous system and from our energy. And if we're not consciously putting in some deposits, if we're consciously not putting some money back in the tank or in the bank or in our tank, if we're not putting in
Mhm.
various deposits, which might look like very small. They can be small things, they can be big things, but they might be things like, first of all, making sure we're eating enough, so making sure you're well fueled. But it might look like doing, a 5 minute meditation. It might look like going for a walk around your office block. It might be bringing your bottle to make sure that you're hydrated well.
Yep.
So we look at all the ways that we add in deposits throughout the day. And then usually what can happen is by the evening, you'll definitely be depleted. You probably will be in like a minus, right? Or you'll definitely have used your money. But what we want to make sure of is that we're not gone into the red.
Yeah.
If we're gone into the red and we've used all of the money in the bank, you can be sure as shit you're going to be doing things and behaving in ways that you maybe don't perhaps want to behave, like doom scrolling or like,
Mhm.
collapsing in front of with Netflix and checking out from the kids and not being present, or you'll be munching away at whatever's in the press.
100%. Yeah.
That's
I'm
another
actually,
reason.
whenever you were saying that, I was like, I was laughing. I was like, how good am I at saving now? How good am I at
What's your saving like throughout the day, Shauna?
what's that like now? So I think another one is transitions. Um, so
Yeah.
transition from the day to the evening. That, especially if you think of that, even in terms of the mental load, you're at work and you're doing everything that you're doing at work and all the demands are there, and then all of a sudden you're shifting gear. And even just that shift in gear, that movement from this to this, it brings up a lot of feeling and emotion and a change of energy in the body. And sometimes then even we don't like that, or whatever that is causing, we're soothing it with food. And just being even aware that, that feeling is there, transitions are real. How can I help myself transition better? And I know, especially for females, and I'm not saying it's, the case that it's all females, but like even when we talk about the mental load, you're transitioning from this mental load at work, if you're working or you're out during the day or doing whatever, to then this mental load in the evenings. And sometimes even, and I know that they're slightly separate, but sometimes even the thoughts of that, now I have to go home, and like, and you and I both know what that's like. Now I have to go home and, I've had all these jobs here and now I have all these jobs
Yeah.
here, and this is
Yay
causing
for me.
me to feel a certain way. And there is some chocolate crisp sweets and biscuits, and that is helping me feel so much better. So just being aware of how you do transitions, and we are going to address, once we get through a couple of these points, we'll maybe talk about overall globally what people can do. But I think transitions is a big one, and people don't even realize that.
Totally. We don't realize how we need to, like, how the energy shift and what's going on for us, like, throughout the day. That can be going from your morning into work to getting into the car to transition and even to transition into bedtime. Like, there's loads of transitions throughout the day, but not just throughout the day, which brings me on to the next point. As women, we transition loads throughout the month. So we have obviously our cycle.
Yeah.
And that's another
Yeah.
one actually that can lead into
Oh my
evening
God.
eating and evening
Yeah.
snacking, because there can be periods throughout the month that we might require more energy, that we're maybe more emotionally depleted, mentally depleted, physically depleted. We might need more. So sometimes instead of judging what our
Yeah.
body might be telling us, or we're trying to restrict or whatever it might be, we're maybe not allowing ourselves to have that additional energy to get
Yep.
through that certain period of
100%.
time. So certainly premenstrual, and it doesn't matter if you're not having a physical cycle, because as women we have cycles.
Hmm.
That's how we roll. Um, and we will likely have periods where we are hungrier. We have an increased need for food, and it might be more intense cravings for certain sugary foods
Hmm.
or whatever it might be. And I guess it's just about noticing, like, maybe tracking your cycle is a good way to gather that
100%
information.
track the cycle. I would highly recommend that.
Yeah.
Definitely. Because the
To
thing
know.
about this is, especially when you're an intuitive eater and you become attuned to your signals in your body and you're quite attuned to your hunger, fullness, and satisfaction, especially the week before, you can be connected to your hunger and your fullness. And you're noticing, you maybe patterns that normally exist. And then all of a sudden that you're like, and I'm hungry again, and I'm craving again, and I'm craving again. And you're having more than what you've had the previous 3 weeks, but it's hormonal. It does settle. It does
Yeah,
settle like the week later. But sometimes people
totally.
panic in that moment and be like, oh, what is wrong with me? Because then we're conditioned into the fact that, oh, this is bad. And, all those beliefs around that, which also need shifted.
Well, you always joke and say that you're probably
Oh, yeah.
100% sure that every diet you ever started on was the week before your period.
100%. I like
Yeah.
I broke my rule last week, as you know, but anyway, because it's like I never sign up to anything new the week before my period. No, because I
Now, she
know.
didn't sign up to a diet.
No, I didn't sign up to a diet. I got a new PT, which I had been thinking about for a long time, but last week's hormonal energy tipped me over the edge to do it. But I also was laughing at it. We were laughing at that shit, weren't we?
Yeah.
But on a not so funny thing, yeah, the reality is that how I felt the week before my period, I can absolutely guarantee you that's when I signed up to the
Yeah.
list as long as your arm of diet plans because it was so horrendous.
Yeah.
And
So
now that you
horrendous.
know
I
that,
know.
when
So
you know that knowledge is power, you're able to work with that. So if that's you and you
totally.
find even and eating because of that, calm down. Calm down is
And
what I'm saying.
also, if you're going to track your cycle, I would also get an app that also tracks the moon, because moon, monthly cycle, it's all connected. And I think that knowing when there's a new moon, knowing when there's a full moon, that information can be also really helpful, because we can feel things intensely around those times. So just FYI, track the moon as well.
Track it too. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, emotions then is one as well, of course.
Big one.
What emotionally has gone on and what emotionally even has gone on in the evenings and what feelings are coming up, in terms of being in the house, what's going on in your relationship, what's going on in your relationship with your children if you have them, what's going on that day. All of that, being aware of what am I feeling in my body and what is this communicating and what do I need and do I, and there's nothing wrong with emotional eating as we know, but it's when we're doing it every night and this is the only way we have of meeting those needs, then the emotional side of it definitely needs to be addressed.
Yeah, because, like, of course, like, snacking and eating, like, it's
Hmm.
comforting. It's something to do.
Hmm.
It keeps you company. It can create, like, it can give you a bit of excitement. It can give us so much. And like Andy said, that's not bad. But Jeannie Max, when you find yourself What you can also, maybe this is the next point, right, is that you can go from it being maybe emotional eating, but then you can find yourself that it moves into habitual automatic pilot that will like this is
Yeah.
automaticity where this is a habit. Like I just come in and
Mhm.
what I seem to do is this is my pattern that I've fallen into now is that yes, it may have started off because you were feeling certain feelings, but now that you find a couple of months later, a year
Yeah.
later, 10 years later, you're doing the same thing of the minute the evening finishes where you are done with the dinner, get the kids to bed, da, 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 you then sit down on the couch and you give yourself that half an hour
Yeah.
and that's become you reach for whatever food and then that has become actually more just a habit. It's a habitual pattern.
Habitual.
It
Hmm.
might not necessarily be driven by certain intense emotions. It just could be something that you
Hmm.
do now on a loop
Yeah.
that you
And it
associate a
might
certain
originally
time.
have been driven by emotion.
Yeah,
It will have originally been
yeah,
driven by the emotion of feel this feeling, want to relax, eat the food while relaxing, and then the brain very quickly
yeah.
develops a pattern of want to relax, eat this food, relax, relax, eat food, relax, and shuts out the fact of we don't care if the stimulus is now happening or not. We just know you want to relax. We know the best way of doing that. And then it just
Let's do it.
becomes this is what we do. Yeah.
This is what we do.
So
And we
yeah.
do that over and over and over because that's how we roll as humans. We most of what we
Mhm.
do day in day out is actually habitual. We wouldn't survive if we weren't able to put things on automatic pilot, right? Because
Yeah.
we couldn't possibly we take in like billions of data and information bits like per second in the day. So we can't take in a huge so much information without putting it into automatic pilot and storing it there for when we need it. So that's what happens, right? So
Mhm.
and
Yeah, and I
and
think
this
the other one too is there's something about, and because I see this quite often, people say, and they would say this to us, even Sinead, like women are powerhouses. They do amazing things throughout the day, and then they come and they say, but this is the one area of my life where I don't have control in, or you know, I just can't get under control, or it's causing me pain. And actually, when we sit down and say, well, tell me what you're doing during the day. And you might be running companies, you might be organizing everything for everybody, organizing the whole family, being everything to all people. And you're like, well, what are you doing for yourself? What are you actually doing for yourself? And
yeah.
eating is a way, if you think about it, if you're not self-caring, if you're not regulating, if you're not doing all the good things that you should do for yourself, then food is a way of giving to yourself. And your body and mind will take that and say, okay, if you're not giving it to me, now here's this behavior. This this is going to give it to me. So I think that's another one that it's very unconscious as well, that it's a means to give to yourself, even though,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Like food is the first thing we get really when we're born into this
I
world, isn't
know.
it? Like,
Hmm.
so it's a way of showing love. It's a way of so again, like you said, if you're not getting that throughout the day, you're give to everybody else. Food becomes that way of expressing what you deserve. And
Hmm.
even though it doesn't make you feel good in that moment, it doesn't matter because there's a part of you
Yeah,
that's like, I am fed up of caring for everybody else and I am want
yeah,
something for me. So I'm going to get that. So I'm going to drive you to
yeah,
eat that food.
yeah,
That's going to be a moment or 5 minutes for just
yeah.
you.
And if you're not, if you're not doing anything else that's going to give me that, well, then this is where we are going to get it. And as you say, in those moments, and it's not about judging it, because I think that brings us into then, well, what do we do? How can we work this? So the first thing is about creating awareness.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Well, we can't do anything unless we're
And
aware of
change
it.
unless
So,
we're aware. Absolutely. So be aware, the curious watcher of yourself without judgment and lots of self-compassion, which is the next one. You know,
yeah.
not judging it, trying to understand it and bringing self-compassion to it. That sometimes food and using food this way in the evenings is the best way we have to cope that allows us to do all the other things. You know,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of other ways we can use the cope, which will be much more dysfunctional and not allow us to be all things to all people. So it's bringing self-compassion to that. And then also,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think that like if you're somebody who's listening to this now and you've just listened to us talk about some of the reasons and you're like, oh, well, okay, well, what do I do with that? What probably most people are going to be doing is, well, I need to figure out what it is that's the why, so I can stop doing the behavior,
mhm,
right? But I would really encourage you to not focus on stopping the behavior because
yeah,
that's just the outcome, right? That's not the
yeah,
cause. That's not actually what's going on. So what I would say is that take your attention off that. And as you said, Shauna, it's about redirecting your attention to notice, well, what did you resonate out of everything you've heard us say
Hmm.
so far? Like maybe you resonated with like transitions, or maybe
Yeah.
you are on a diet at the moment and that might be playing a role, or maybe you resonate with something that we've said. And what we would say is just spend some time just gathering some information. Like, what do you notice is happening in your mind? Like, what's the story? What are the
Hmm.
thoughts that are present? What are you noticing in your body? What are you feeling? What are you sensing? What emotions are present? Um, like maybe start journaling, and not everybody's a
Yeah.
journaler, but you can gather a lot of information if you like
Notice.
again, sometimes when we see it, put it down on paper, and
Yeah.
maybe after like a week or so, you might
Hmm.
notice, oh yeah, this is what I notice happens on these certain days, or every day, or this is what I notice in the evening is coming up for me. Um, that's really important because, as we said, you can't do anything about what's going on
Yeah.
if you don't first gather the information and create that awareness. That's the first step.
100%. And then it's about adding in, as you say, we want the behavior to lessen without focusing on lessening the behavior. And how we do that is we're like, okay,
Paradox.
we see you, we see what we're doing, and also we're just going to start doing these kind of things, and we'll
Yeah.
notice, oh, we're actually not doing that anymore or as much, because there's nothing wrong with eating in the evenings either. We don't demonize all of it. It's just if it's all the time and it feels out of control. So I think eating regularly is key. You
Mm.
know, like we
You
bang
won't.
that drum so much.
We
Self-compassion,
bang.
eat regularly.
We bang that drum so hard, but I think that like you cannot overstate the
Yeah,
importance of eating enough. You will never stop your evening snacking, that kind of sense of urgency, and it nearly feels
yeah,
compulsive. But like you won't
100%.
override your biological
Natural, yeah, that's
drive
it.
to
Jeez.
keep you alive. If you are starving yourself throughout the day, like Gomara Jack, you're not going to stop the evening eating until you start eating enough. Like there's no way
100%.
around that.
You can't, and not even the emotional work or the
No.
self-care or the compassion, that will sit on eating enough. And then I suppose the next one would be nervous system work, a bit around regulating the nervous system, isn't that right? Because behavior change even sits further then after
Yeah.
that. So what nervous system thing would you recommend, Sinead? I'm just trying to think off the top of my head.
Well, I think that first, and we're going to be doing a bit on, we will be doing a lot more on nervous system coming up actually in coming weeks. But I think that like, you're so right. If we're in a state of dysregulation, then it's very difficult to actually even be thinking about behavior change. So,
Mhm.
um, again, even going back to the analogy we mentioned earlier around like your nervous system bank balance, and just noticing like if you were to even consider what might your own bank balance be like in the evening, are you in the red? Because if you're in the red, you're dysregulated. You will be
Yeah,
in a state of
yeah.
dysregulation. Because if we think about, and again, we will be expanding more on this because it's not really, there won't be enough time to talk about it in this mini pod, but we will be talking about the various on the polyvagal ladder, where we've got our ventral vagal, our state of connection, and then
Hmm.
how we kind of move into activation state. So your fight or flight, which is like a bit chaotic, a bit anxious, a bit itchy bitchy twitchy, we
Hmm.
might call it. Then we move into like our shut down, exhausted, burnt out, right? So we kind of have our three kind of main states. And here's the piece to know about our nervous system. Unless we're in a regulated state, we're going to have real difficulty accessing our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that makes
Hmm.
rational
Yeah.
decisions. So, this is why if you're starved in the evening or you're completely dysregulated, your brain, you don't have
You
access to
can't
that
think
part of
yourself
your
into,
brain
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's that's saying to you, well,
And I
really,
think
you're
that's
not
really
going.
important. I think people really need to know, people need to know this. I remember when we found, we were working on this, it was like, why have we not been told this our whole lives to check in what state am I in? And actually accessing my rational thinking is practically impossible when I'm in this state.
It's impossible. That part
Yeah,
of your brain is offline when you're dysregulated, which is why we can't problem solve effectively, or we can't think
yeah.
about our future needs. That's why when you're in that place in the evening when
You
you're
are going to the
dysregulated,
cupboard and you're like, this is the
yeah,
solution, I'm just
you're
having it.
you're your
Hmm.
your brain, you don't have access to that part of your brain that's like, well, you probably won't feel great, Sinead, after eating those three
Hmm.
bars of chocolate in 10, 20 minutes time.
Yeah,
You don't have access to that
yeah.
information that you actually do hold within, because you do have that information, but you don't have access to it. It's like it's
And
offline.
I think that follows on to then, once we regulate or we work on regulating our nervous system, it really, and this ties into well, what we talk about in our Healthy Habits Hub, this ties into the daily practices of giving to yourself in your healthy habits way. and your meditation, your journaling, your gratitude, sleep,
Deep hygiene
eating
is so underrated.
regularly,
Mm.
moving in a way that you like, hydrating your body, managing your nervous system. It's all those like pillars of habits that are going to keep you going to stop that dysregulation and, let the behavior fade without ever having to force it. And also, before we go, the final thing I think I would like to say is that sometimes when it comes to habitual change as well, it can be uncomfortable. So if you're saying, I'm not going to do this, I'm changing a habit, it can be uncomfortable. And it's being okay with a bit of discomfort without it tipping your nervous system or out it tipping you into a way of, oh, now this means, I'm dieting or restricting. No, it's not. And I suppose it takes a lot of work even to be able to recognize that and work that, but it is another way of looking at it too.
Totally, you're so right, because the reality of it is no real change happens unless there's some level of discomfort,
Yeah.
because the brain does not like change. It
Mhm.
likes to do what it done
Yeah.
yesterday and the day before and the day before. So if you need to understand that you're not doing it wrong, if you notice that there is like resistance and it feels like
Yeah.
resistance or feels like difficulty, or that you're up against something. But as you said though, we
Yeah.
don't want it to be so
Doing
intense
so
that it's
much
like,
that it's activating the nervous system, and that's
yeah,
that's the key. That's the key, which takes time, and yet that's where you have to put all the other things in place. So self-care and a way of all your healthy habits as well,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
keep adding in. Yeah.
And if people want to work on this, you know where to find us. We obviously have our Healthy Habits Hub that you're more than welcome to join. It's a non-diet space where we work on creating lots of sustainable habits that are going to support our health and well-being long term. Also, if you're somebody that is identifies, well, actually, my relationship with food and body is crap. It's not great. And you want to do some work on that, we
Mhm.
obviously also have our Intuitive Eating Hub, which looks at a lot more of that healing work. So you know where to
Healing
find
work.
us.
Yeah.
Reach out.
Mhm.
There we go,
Thank
folks.
you.